Hey, Facebook. Good morning.
Welcome, Facebook. This is the Veterans Impact Show. We're going to be starting live on the air with our radio in just a second. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Join us. Be a part of the movement. Be a part of The Mission Continues. Right, Chuck?
Continue the mission, baby. Charlie
right.
Mike, that's our motto.
All right, here we go on the air. Yep. Across America, you're listening to the Veterans Impact Show, featuring stories of veterans who continue the mission in their communities with honor, courage, and commitment. Brought to you by Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Well, welcome aboard. This is Jim Blythe with helicopter pilot, Marine Corps veteran, and the most active veteran advocate that I know of in North Texas, Chuck Wright. Welcome aboard, brother.
Good morning. Welcome. Very excited about today's guest.
I am too, but I'd like to do a quick shout out because we have so many stations down in South Texas, and I was given a post that Uvalde Strong is having a music benefit at the Texas Pride Barbecue in Adkin, Texas on June the 12th, high noon to midnight. They're going to have some great music, so you can go to the No Bull Radio Network and take a look at their website. I got to tell you, they're raising money for what went on in Uvalde and what is going on right now, and we want to support their efforts down in South Texas.
Absolutely. Definitely feel for those parents.
Oh, man.
And that community.
Man, we all hurt when that happened. All right, we have one of the most special guests, a leader, Colonel John Antal, retired U.S. Army tank commander, unbelievable writer, award-winning author, New York Times best-selling author, Amazon best-selling author, and a man that I look to for leadership. Welcome to Colonel John Antal. John, welcome and good day.
Jim, thank you very much for inviting me, and Chuck, good to see you all, and welcome everyone out there who's listening.
We're here. I called you up and said, could we talk about D-Day? Because D-Day is coming up in just a few days, and the important lessons that we learned in D-Day, and it just seems like if you don't understand history, you're going to repeat it, right, guys?
You know, that's one of our big challenges, is that as human beings, we don't learn from history. It seems particularly true of our current generation because we basically think everything was developed 10 minutes ago, and that no one before us was very smart because they didn't have smartphones, right? So how could they be smart? We look at all the technology we have, but we really don't learn from history, and that's one of the lessons, and it's a sad point because history gives you so many opportunities to mentally understand and compare what's going on today with what happened in the past. And that can give you what is really crucial for leaders around the world, no matter what kind of job you have, and that is the development of foresight. And foresight is the ability to solve problems in the short term and create solutions in the long run. And without an understanding of history, you can't have foresight.
Now, we have your book up, The 7 Leadership Lessons of D-Day, and it's available on Amazon. It's one of the best books that I've ever read, and I think basically it ought to be assigned reading when kids are in high school, John. It's that good. Tell me, what motivated that, and what was the main thing you were trying to accomplish here?
Well, 7 Leadership Lessons of D-Day is a book I wrote a couple of years ago about the stories of D-Day that many people haven't heard about or haven't really heard about in great depth. And D-Day was a tremendous effort. It was one of the shining moments of the United States of America and the Western Allies. We had to defeat Nazi Germany, and we couldn't do that unless we took the fight to them. You can bomb them, you can do all sorts of other things, you can blockade their ports, but until you put people on the ground and actually take them out of power, you know, the Nazis would continue to do what they did. And when you look at the horrific murder of not only 8 million Jews, but over 10 million other people in the concentration camps, Russian prisoners, people from all over Europe, gypsies, all these people that were murdered in this horrible sort of mechanical means of extermination, and you look at the evil that was there, we had to invade Europe to stop that. And D-Day was about that.
I think Truman said something when he was asked about dropping the atomic bomb. He said, we have to take away their ability to make war. What you just said is exactly that. We had to take away their ability to make war. Okay, today we're faced with a situation of another madman invading a neighbor country. Wow. I look back and I remember, if you said to me, Jim, do you remember Neville Chamberlain? Well, I don't remember seeing him, but I know who he was. He was Prime Minister of England, who basically just, correct me if you think I'm wrong, rolled over and didn't really oppose Hitler and walked out with a piece of paper and said, oh, we've got a truce. And what happened is Hitler just said, and kept right on going, tore up Poland, tore up Czechoslovakia, took over the world of Europe.
Yeah, that's correct. Our challenge is in any of these situations, like in the situation in Ukraine with Putin, is that the rule of law is not observed by criminals. And Putin is acting in a criminal manner here. Whether or not he's crazy, that's for the psychologists to debate. He certainly has not executed an effective war against Ukraine, but he is now turning the tables a bit, and we should all be careful about making a fast conclusion about how this war is going to go. But as far as World War II and the comparisons are, I think you're exactly on target. One of the things is we just said is that we don't learn from history, and the science and technology that we have now today doesn't make us immune from the laws of history. So as you see history unfolding in Ukraine and you see the history of World War II and D-Day, we need to understand that is truly a battle between freedom and power. And many people believe, and if you took a poll, most people would probably raise their hands right now who are listening, that freedom is a universal value, that people around the world really want freedom. The problem is that that's not true. Freedom is not a universal value. Power is the universal value. Mm-hmm. That's why the world has been ruled by kings and dictators and oligarchs and all sorts of other people who have power. And power is always trying to squash freedom. And what we've done in the United States of America is we have made into law our liberties, which enshrine those freedoms. And as we start to pick away at those liberties, our freedoms will go. And the rest of the world, when you look at the history of the world, is primarily this struggle between freedom and power has won out 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100. And that's one of the reasons, and the only reason, that the United States of America is exceptional, because we decided to rule ourselves in an era where no one had ever done that before. There had been a few experiments, but no one had done it like we had.
John, you so eloquently put that. Another way to say it is our government was set up for us to tell the government what to do. We, the people, tell the government what to do, not the government tells us what to do. What I see going on right now is that's flip-flopped. And I think a lot of people need to wake up to the fact that the government is not the answer. We are the answer, and coming together and stopping a lot of this is a major move in the right direction. That's what it was all about. We, the people, not the government.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jim. But our biggest challenge is that you see freedom carries with it, and this whole idea of American liberty carries with it tremendous responsibilities. And most people don't want to rise to those responsibilities. Too many of them want to be told what to do. And that's the problem with people in the world, is that in humankind, most people have wanted someone to be in charge and tell them what to do and give them a purpose. What happens is when you have freedom and liberty, it's up to you. That's a scary proposition. Whether you win or lose, whether you succeed or fail, is up to your merit.
So,
Nobody
John,
else.
one
So
of
all
the
these
things.
stories are about how to obfuscate this.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I want to go back, and I believe it was General McChrystal who made this comment, but he talked about we no longer, as Americans, earn our citizenship. Other than those who serve in the military, who serve as first responders, we see too few people willing to earn citizenship. I don't want to go down the political angle, but we're opening up the borders to allow millions in, and we just want to give them citizenship with no understanding of what it took. But to, in 30 days we will celebrate the 4th of July, and there'll be fireworks and there'll be fun. But to think back to the words that Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, to the words that John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison primarily, who the primary authors of the Constitution, wrote. And the challenge I put out there, find me a governing document that is better written. But that was only 1776 when that process started. In terms of, when we're talking about Europe and we're talking about nations that go back and have a lineage of thousands of years old, self-governance, what you're talking about, this burning desire for freedom, is a fairly new concept for the individual man.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, it is not a universal value. The universal value is power, and if we understand that, then we can see the world in different ways. Now, your concept about earning it is really important, because that was truly something when we look at World War II. You think about the great sacrifice of all of the patriots who fought in that war against the Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. I mean, our survival was at stake. Had we given up, we would have been conquered. Had we decided to fight, we had to win. So we decided to fight, and we had to win. And people stepped up to the plate. They actually volunteered in droves in the first few years, and it was amazing how much sacrifice and how much leadership the American people showed. When you think about things like the Battle of Midway, which happened in 1942, the turning point in the Pacific, was really the result of thousands of people were involved. Thousands of men were involved in planning and everything else. But when you got down to the execution and everything started to fall apart, and then they had to put it back together and make it all happen, it was down to a relatively few number of people. And every situation in history is much like that. Leadership matters. Leadership matters. You want to see a problem with the country right now and our inflation issue and the issue of all of these other problems that we keep exacerbating and talking about. It's all about leadership. And what we have to do is have leadership across the board, not just in one place or another. We have to have leaders at all levels.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things, you can't argue with having a better environment, but you got to have a plan. You got to have leadership. You can't take a freight train doing 150 miles an hour and do a 180-degree turn without train wrecking it and killing a lot of people. This situation we're in right now may have the best intentions, but it's going to end up so, and they go, oh, well, everybody gets a little bit of pain. No, you are about, Jamie Dimon has said it. I've had Tim Snyder, who's an economist, say it. We are about to have a real serious economic mess because of the leadership. But let's go back to talking.
Speaking of trains going 180 degrees off topic, can we get back to D-Day?
Yeah, because I'm really upset and passionate about what is going on right now.
So, John, because you have a new book, and we're going to spend the second half of the show really talking about that and drilling deep into that. But I want to go back to one of the books that you wrote, and we'll do this after. We're coming up on a break. You can hear the music going. We're going to take a break. We'll continue to talk with Facebook, but I want to talk about your leadership lessons of D-Day, 7 leadership lessons of D-Day.
Yeah, this is one of the most important books I've read. I actually have a signed copy. I don't
know. I'm not sure. I have 2 signed copies of 7 leadership lessons of the American Revolution.
You bet. I got one of those too because it's a great book. Again, we're telling everybody, look on Facebook, The 7 Leadership Lessons of D-Day. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's a must read for every high school student. So this is Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright, and we're with Colonel John Antal, U.S. Army retired. We're going to be right back talking about war in his new book, 7 Seconds to Die. All right, Facebook, we're back while we're letting the commercials play for regular radio. Chuck, that was great. Colonel Antal, this is just a phenomenal discussion. And guys, I'm sorry I get passionate, but what's going on is because
We don't mind you getting passionate. You were just going political.
Well, I didn't mean to, but I should. I got to tell you, as a certified senior advisor and working with the elderly, that's who's getting hit so terribly, terribly hard by all of this. And that's, to me, that's terrible.
Well, Jim, you know, there's a World War II parallel to this. Actually, not just World War II, throughout history. When you believe in an ideology over reality, and you're willing to force that ideology on people, whether they like it or not, and you have the power to do so, you're going to cause a lot of pain and misery. And in many cases, it's not going to work.
No,
one of the beautiful things about the United States of America is that, unlike most other nations, the liberties that we've created and the system that we've created, as chaotic and sometimes unruly as it is a self-adjusting system. You see, most other autocracies are not self-adjusting. They go off the deep end because one guy has power and he makes everyone else so afraid that they won't do anything. I mean, Putin has just now relieved most of his senior generals, and he sent a bunch of people to prison. So, you know, when he's upset, he's going to fix it his way. Now, if he drives that whole nation of Russia off the deep end, who knows what will happen, and the misery and the pain and agony that he's caused, you can see even in Ukraine. So our challenge is that we right now are following an ideological track, you know, an idea that green or something else is the only thing we can do. And therefore we're driving that home no matter what the pain or misery, and the people who have power don't care. Now, because we have a self-adjusting system in the United States of America, I believe that won't last much longer. I don't believe that they can do that much longer. I believe that there will be a pushback and a change. We've always swung kind of back and forth, and that's part of that self-adjusting system. Mm-hmm. When that breaks, we're in trouble. When that breaks, it means that the power has overcome our ability for the self-adjustment. The entire Bill of Rights, our entire Constitution, is about self-adjusting. That's what checks and balances are. Mm-hmm. So this whole self-adjusting thing is one of it's almost like a perpetual motion machine. You know, you can't make a perpetual motion machine, but boy, if you could, wouldn't that be interesting? Well, to have a self-adjusting system, that's what our founding fathers created. Their genius was that every little piece of that, like every one of the Bill of Rights, is crucial.
Absolutely. Now, when we come back, we want to be talking about 7 Seconds to Die. So, Chuck, why don't you start off with leading us into that when we come back. Facebook, thank you for being with us. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Share this out. We want people to hear. We want people to learn. We've got to do something to change the hearts and minds of people, and they have to understand history. And one of the best things you can do is read a book like The Leadership Lessons of D-Day, right, Chuck?
So one of the things that I've known, John and I have known each other for a while, several years. Oh, we're getting ready to come back, so I'll continue that thought when we're on live radio.
I'm the time bandit, I guess.
That's okay.
The time enforcer.
She's the time bandit.
Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. You're on board with Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright, U.S. Marine, U.S. Navy, and the outstanding Colonel John Antal. Colonel Antal, one of the things that we were talking about during the break, and really where we wanted to go, is the difference in war. You have been doing a lot of work, and you've written this book, 7 Seconds to Die, right, Chuck?
Yeah. And I'm doing my darndest to keep us on track, but it's just not going to happen. It's a lot of fun when you go live, so you never know what's going to come up next. What I was going to say, our Facebook crowd heard it, but now for our live radio people, I've known John Antal for a long time, and one of the things, and I've heard him speak several times, which is even more fun, but he's written several books about leadership, and that's what we're talking about. And before we jump into your newest book, John, let's go back to, because we're focused on D-Day today, sort of, but talk a little bit about your inspiration. I know that you and your friend J.P. Hogan have done a ton of research and study, not just on Normandy, but in a lot of places, but you've written a book about D-Day, and talk about that a little bit. And let's use that as a segue to talk about 7 Seconds to Die, your newest book.
Will do, Chuck. Thank you very much. My purpose in life is to develop leaders and inspire service. So one of the things that we did back in about 2013 was create a group of retired, mostly Army veterans, who took college ROTC cadets out to different places and taught them leadership on battlefields. And we took them out to Vicksburg for 3-day events, and we also took groups of them to Normandy. And so around 2014, I said, okay, it's time for me to write a book on D-Day so that I can write out all of the great lessons learned, or some of the great lessons learned, because there's so many. Just write a few of the most dramatic lessons learned out so that we can use this to really help inform the American public, and also groups like we were trying to educate. And of course, we did all this at our own expense. We didn't do this. We didn't do this for profit. We paid for it. In fact, we raised the money to pay for the cadets to go to Normandy for free. They didn't have to pay. So we brought usually 10 or 14 cadets over there to Normandy, depending on the year. And we've stopped all this because of COVID, and it's unfortunate. But that was part of the effort. And because of that, I've always been interested in D-Day. It's a dramatic, very dramatic battle, a very important part of American history. And the lessons learned, leadership lessons in particular, are valuable for any organization, not just the military, but businesses, and for your own personal leadership, because it talks about decision making. It talks about foresight, that ability to solve problems in the short term and create solutions in the long run. It talks about courage, and courage is the first prerequisite of leadership. You have to have courage to be a leader. And every aspect of leadership can be played out, by looking at the story of D-Day. And I picked 7 lessons that went into depth to show that, including Eisenhower's decision on how they were going to actually land what day, because that was a huge decision. Had he picked the wrong day, the weather could have could have destroyed the invasion, killed thousands and destroyed the invasion. If the invasion had failed, it would have been another year before we could have done that. And who knows if Germany would have had the atomic bomb by then, because they were working hard on it. So our ability to get on the beach and to start moving inland and fight the Nazis was crucial. But there's other stories in there that are all the way down to company commander and lieutenants. And it talks about the paratroopers, and it talks about leaders who, there was an Alamo at D-Day. There was a group of paratroopers that landed behind the lines, way behind the lines, too far behind the lines to even get to their forces. They were 25 kilometers behind the lines. But they were also at a place that was crucial because they controlled a road junction. And that road junction led to the town of Carentan. So when you watch Band of Brothers, or if you know anything about the Battle of Carentan, none of that would have happened if this group of paratroopers hadn't landed in this town and stopped the Germans for about 6 days.
I think that might be my favorite chapter in the book.
Yeah, and almost all of them were killed, except for the ones who were able to get into the swamps and try to escape. So it was a horrific fight, and it's the stuff that a movie should be made of. None has been done yet, but that would be interesting. But this is the kind of stories that I have in 7 Leadership Lessons of D-Day. And the idea is to appeal to a broad audience of folks and give them an idea about how real people in difficult circumstances made a difference through their leadership, through their character, through their competencies and their commitment.
And we've got the music. We're going to take another short break. We'll still be talking for our Facebook crowd, but for those listening on terrestrial radio,
very good.
Yeah, and
we're going to
thank you for being on board.
And make it smooth.
Yeah, thank you for being on board. We'll be right back after these words from our partners. All right, Facebook. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am, and I know Chuck is as well. And
John, I want to jump in here with something. There's something that you said, and we are talking about D-Day, and I cannot fathom what it would be like to be charging that beach, facing absolutely murderous gunfire, explosions and bombs and everything else. But you talked about the word courage. And you know what? It's not always about standing up in the face of a bad guy and risking your life. Sometimes courage is just making the right decision, doing the right thing, even though the crowd is going in another direction. And I think that's one of the things that's missing in our culture right now is that personal courage to do the right, to think something through. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's missing. I just think we don't emphasize it enough. I see soldiers, and I talk to soldiers and Marines all the time, and I am amazed at their courage. But I believe you're right, Chuck. I believe that fear is a reaction. All of us face fear, and
Sure.
we become afraid. But courage is a decision. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. Because what you have to do as a leader is cycle through the fear faster than anyone else and decide to be courageous, to decide to do something. And once you put in your mind that you're going to do something, you've overcome most of the shock of fear, because most people stand there or drop and don't do anything. They're just fearful. They get totally consumed. Leaders have to have focus and the ability to control themselves to the point where they can take that decision. In every situation where I've been in a life and death situation, and like many of you, I've been in several, I have decided at a certain point to do something. And I realize that fear is a reaction. Without it, you'll die every time. You got to have fear, because if you didn't have fear, you'd jump off the cliff. You'd walk into fire. You have to have the fear to understand, no, that's stupid. Don't do that. But courage is a decision. You might run through the fire to save someone. That's a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing, and for our Facebook crowd, the motto of the show is Charlie Mike, continue the mission, which is the one thing that I think our veterans bring to the business table. I know you've certainly brought it to the business table with your post-military exploits, but it's leadership. It's the ability to make decisions, and some of them are not game-changing, end-of-the-world decisions. Some of them are just simple decisions. Hey, here's a problem that I've got at work. I'm going to take the initiative. I don't need to go ask the boss what I need to do here. We're just going to solve the problem. And you mentioned that earlier, which was one of the little synapses in my mind fired and reminded me of that. But that all ties together, and that is what the show is about. Is
You're
about
exactly right.
continuing that mission. So back to
Exactly
your
right.
book about D-Day. Let me ask you this, just kind of a fun question. As you've written these books, we've got about a half a minute. So when we come back on live radio, I'll re-ask the question, do you have a favorite chapter? And we're down to about 15 seconds before we go to break. Come back from break. I'm going to ask you about your favorite chapter, leadership lessons at D-Day, or if you have one, you may not.
all right,
They're
here
all
we
awesome.
go. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. What a great conversation we're having with Colonel John Antal. And Chuck, you've made some really great points. You were going to put a question out there while we were on the break talking with Facebook. And by the way, Facebook, thank you for joining us. Share us. subscribe to us on YouTube. Let's go forward with that question, Chuck.
So we're talking about 7 leadership lessons of D-Day. That is one of several books that John has written. But John, I want to ask you, it's kind of a personal thing because you've written several books along these lines. Do you have a favorite chapter? What is your favorite story from D-Day? And I know there's 100, 1,000 great stories. Do you have one that stands out to you?
Yeah, there are many stories that I love talking about because they're so dramatic, and each one of them has powerful lessons. Eisenhower's decision, of course, to pick the right time and have the courage to make a call to make the invasion happen when the weather was not optimal, when many people were saying don't go, he still decided to go, and he did so for all the right reasons, and he had 100 permutations going through his brain on how to do this. The landing at Pointe du Hoc and James L. Rudder and his group of Rangers that land and climb the cliffs and take the Pointe du Hoc. Most people don't know that they were there for 2 days without support. They didn't get reinforcements, many reinforcements. They got one boatload, hardly any supplies. At the end of the fight, they were being counterattacked by Germans, and they were throwing rocks. They were out of ammo. And finally, the 743rd Tank Battalion and the 5th Ranger Battalion with those tanks came in and linked up with them and ended that fight. But I think the most important, the most dramatic story for me is the story of the tanks on Omaha Beach. You see, most people think that there was no tank support on Omaha Beach, and if you watch Saving Private Ryan, you see tanks, but they don't seem to be doing anything. What had happened was we had 2 tank battalions, and those tank battalions, one of them was the 741st and one was the 743rd, and they were swimming tanks. These were new, unique, secret weapons, and we had practiced them, but we had not practiced them in the bad squalls of the 8-foot waves that were going on while we were moving into D-Day. And so the 741st let their tanks out from the landing craft too far away because the Navy was worried about being shot. So they downed the ramps and the guys came out, and almost every one of them drowned. Almost every one of them went into the water and sank. The other battalion commander made a decision. He saw this, he saw the waves, and he says, take this into the beach. And the Navy commander agreed. And they both together made that decision, and they brought those tanks right into the beach and dropped the ramps, and the tanks came ashore. Then the tanks started to fight. Now, they were behind schedule. They started to fight and move forward, but there were a lot of infantry in the way, and they didn't want to run people over, and they were dead everywhere and everything. So they were shooting at the pillboxes. The Navy couldn't see the pillboxes because the Germans were genius. When they set up their defenses, they put them in enfilade, and what they did was they covered the side that was facing the sea with tons of concrete and dirt and natural terrain, but they could shoot down the beach from the flank. So you imagine shooting both sides of the beach, not shooting forward. So the tanks saw this and started to shoot both concrete rounds and white phosphorus rounds at this. Now, the sad part about the whole thing about D-Day is that our radio system was really poor. Radios today are much better. Our cell phones today can talk around the world. In those days, you couldn't talk very far at all with your FM radio. And the problem was the infantry radios couldn't talk to the tanks, and the tanks couldn't talk to the artillery, and the tanks couldn't talk to the ships. So nobody could talk to each other, even if their radios were working. So when the tankers, the U.S. Army tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion, started to shoot those white phosphorus rounds at the bunkers, the Navy gunners who were looking for targets but couldn't figure out what to shoot because all their shore gun parties had been killed, saw that and said, well, damn it, the tanks are shooting at something. Let's blast that cliff. And that's how we broke out on D-Day.
I see. I never knew that story.
Yeah, when that happened, that's when the 5th Ranger Battalion landed, which is what you saw in Saving Private Ryan, because he was with Colonel Schneider's 5th Ranger Battalion. And they landed, and they were fresh troops, and the guns were being silenced, so there was less fire than before, which was still a lot of fire. But they got ashore, and then they were able to make the breakthrough. So it's all about leaders across the board doing stuff. And the battalion commander of that tank battalion, he was supposed to stay on the landing craft. But instead, he dove overboard, because he couldn't talk to anybody on the radio, swam to shore, got in there, and started beating the sides of the tanks to tell them where to shoot. He got the Distinguished Service Cross for that. He got wounded twice. He got wounded twice, walking on the beach, directing his tanks because the communications failed. That's the kind of stories that people have no idea. The courage of these people to do what needed to be done at the right time, at the desperate moment, saved that whole effort and could have saved World War II.
That sounds like it would make a great movie by itself. But, okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Before we kind of segue into your newest book, you've got a choice. You can only watch one, Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers.
Well, I love both. I believe that if you say Band of Brothers, you're talking the entire series.
Right.
So I would say the entire series gives you a much better flavor for the war and what was at stake, not just on D-Day, but the entire war. There are two different views. For instance, there's also the great movie Fury, which really explains what it's like to be a tank soldier in combat and in World War II. And so we've been blessed to have these kind of movies come out that give you a glimpse. But to really understand this, you need to read. And one of the things that leaders need to understand is that your cup needs to constantly be filled up. How many books have you read in the last year? If you've read only one, okay, you're still pretty good because most people don't read any.
Right.
If you've read 10 books, you're at the top 10% of the people in the United States.
I always like being special.
If you've read 100 books, you're the 1%. Now, what would it take to read 100 books a year? It's not that hard. You really can do it. Our challenge is that we have so much entertainment. We're distracted by so much that we never sit down and focus and take the time necessary to read a book. If you want to lead, you have to read. You have to read to lead.
Now, you talked earlier in the show about those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it. And let's use that because we were talking, and Jim was talking earlier, about what we've learned from D-Day, what we learned from the war with Germany, and we're kind of taking a more strategic look here. But we're dealing with the Ukraine and then the fallout that will come from that. So talk a little bit about what you see there as a lead-in to talk about your new book, 7 Seconds to Die.
Okay, great. First of all, we don't learn from history. However, we can try. And if you look at history, you'll see over and over again issues that you might have gained insight from, develop foresight by studying history. But you can learn that freedom is not a universal value and that power is the universal value. And that's what you see playing out in Ukraine. Ukraine is not a perfect nation by any means. There's corruption and there's issues as there is in every nation, including our own. However, Putin has decided as a Russian dictator that Ukraine should not have independence. So he decided to attack on the 24th of February and to conquer Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians objected, and they have overperformed dramatically. The Russians never expected this. In 2014, when Ukraine surrendered Crimea to Russia, it was a fait accompli. It was an easy fight. There was no battle. There was no shooting. There was just a walkthrough. The Russians expected the same thing. Their greatest shock was when the Ukrainians fought back, and God bless them. And think about this. Think about the leadership involved. Would our leaders act like this? We offer President Zelensky of Ukraine the ability to get out of country. We'll send a special forces team in. We'll get you out of there. You don't have to worry about it. You and your family and some of your key staff. And his answer, I don't need a ride. I need ammunition.
Yep.
Think about that. He's willing to fight for his country. Now, war is horrible, and you can see how horrible it is by what's going on in Ukraine. Surrender, however, is worse. Now, what happened in 2021, while no one was watching, while we were playing around with the pandemic and we were engrossed in an election in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2020, in September 2020. The country of Azerbaijan in the Caucasus fought the country of Armenia in the Caucasus, their neighbors, over a piece of ground called Nagorno-Karabakh, which is about the size of the state of Delaware. Now, both of these used to be Soviet socialist republics, and when the fall of the Soviet Union happened, Armenia and Azerbaijan became independent nations. Azerbaijan is oil rich, Armenia is not. Armenia is very much linked to the Russians and fought in the Soviet sort of way and uses Russian equipment. Azerbaijan started that way, but is transitioning because of their relationship with Turkey. They became good friends and they became more westernized. So what you saw in the fighting in 2020 was in this very 44-day short war, you saw two nations go at it with two different kind of concepts, both the Western concept and a Russian concept. And the Azerbaijanis bought the latest and greatest equipment from Israel. No kidding. They're a Muslim country that is closely aligned to Israel, and Iran doesn't trust them. No kidding. And they're on the border with Iran. So you put all that together, and what you've got is a fight of peer competitors. But it took 44 days. The Armenians held the high ground, and this was the first war in history primarily won with robotic systems. The first war in history primarily won with robotic systems. And how the Azerbaijanis did that was they used loitering munitions and unmanned combat aerial vehicles to create a strike zone over the areas they wanted to destroy, and they put up a persistent precision fires bubble over the enemy in such a way that it disrupted their force, destroyed their command and control, destroyed their air defense, destroyed their artillery, destroyed their tanks. And when they moved on them with maneuver forces, the Armenians just could not respond. The Armenians basically had been pushed off their tipping point. So the Azerbaijanis did an excellent job of showing us what future warfare is going to be like. And most people don't know where Azerbaijan is. So in the United States. So what we need to do is we need to pay attention to recent wars and understand how they happen and learn from them so that our Army, our military, our Marine Corps, our entire United States of America can prepare and not take the kind of casualties we took on D-Day because we're thinking ahead. And if we're able to get the kind of foresight that we need to think ahead with enough foresight, then maybe we can even avert the war. We could have averted, I believe, strongly believe, we could have averted the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We didn't do it. Leadership was lacking. We have a challenge with leadership. Leadership has to have that foresight, and the way you get that foresight is studying. So what I did was I studied in depth this war, the Nagorno-Karabakh War, the second Nagorno-Karabakh War in 2020, and I studied it in depth, and I did everything I could to learn how it went and how the lessons learned, and I put that in the book, 7 Seconds to Die. And it is something I've been briefing to our military over the past 14, 15 months, and I've been briefing every group I can find that wants to get this briefing, from special forces teams to Corps staffs to the Chief of Staff of the Army to a senator on the Senate Armed Services Committee to all sorts of folks that are asking me for these briefings. And I'm not, they're just calling me and saying, hey, I would like to get this update because I understand that you do this. And I do this as a soldier for life. I don't ask for any pay. I do it free for our military.
And John, this book is now an Amazon bestseller. Is that,
well?
Did I
I've been
understand?
blessed with that. That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It is a great honor to have that happen. And of course, the value of why do you write a book? You don't write a book to get rich. I mean, some people might, but those are people who are usually celebrities already. You write a book because you have a story to tell, because you're passionate about trying to get some information out. And in this book in particular, what I'm attempting to do is to tell our military professionals and our leaders what the possibilities of the future are and how we might prepare for them.
Could this warfare be instituted now and stop that thing in Ukraine? Could this be done, or is it too late?
It is very difficult to do anything instantly, of course. But there are ways to prepare and do this if your thinking is right. Of course, if your thinking is wrong, you can't start.
Got it. I'll tell you what.
First we change our minds and we get our thinking together and we figure it out and put it together. So there's there's possibilities. Right now, what we're seeing is capabilities applied in Ukraine in driblets, in penny packets, in small ways that may have no effect.
Boy, absolutely. All right, we're going to be back after these words from all of our partners. Chuck, what a great discussion. And thank you, Colonel. This is incredible. We're going to have a short break, then we're going to come back and finish this conversation. This is Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright with Colonel John Antal. U.S. Army strong, Marine Corps strong, and hey, Navy gets us there. We're here. Facebook, thank you for being on board, and we highly, highly recommend this book. I know I'll get 2 copies, one for you signed and one for me, buddy. How's that?
There we go.
There
Sounds
we go.
good.
We'll take him to breakfast. Colonel, when we get back, let's see what we can do to take you to a new place to eat in our neighborhood. And man, I mean to tell you, I'm buying, because this is a great book and a great program.
Thank you.
Tell us just for Facebook a little bit, Nathaniel, could we go to Colonel Antal's website, the leadership website?
Yeah, leadershiprising.net.
Right, there we go. And you have a number of other books that are available for people to
Yes.
read that are outstanding. So go to Leadership Rising. You will rise to the level of your leadership, or you'll fall without it. And unfortunately, I feel like we're falling right now. I think the stock market and everything else is too. So,
Well, the one promise I'll make you about the stock market, it's going to go up and it's going to go down. And quite frankly, for those that are scared to death of it, this is a buying opportunity. The simplest logic in stocks is buy low, sell high, but it starts going down and people are afraid of it. The smart investors have been on the sidelines for a while and are looking to jump back in. Proud to say most of them are my clients, or many of them are my clients, not most of them. I wish it was most of them. But things are always in flux and in change. And it's not so much, and this goes to, and I think John will agree with me on this, this is where leadership comes into play. We know there's always going to be changes to the plan. You know, every plan looks great until you get hit in the mouth. And then, and it's the leadership that says, okay, we had a problem here. What are we going to do to go there? And that's kind of what comes into mind. John, I wanted to ask you, 60-second elevator pitch, 7 seconds to die is the story for what group? Who needs to be reading this?
I think informed citizens need to read this, particularly military professionals and government officials, but anybody who's interested in the future and the future of warfare. It does get into some of the technical aspects of how this is done, but nothing that anyone can understand. So it's just a matter of understanding that this book is designed to tell our military and our governmental leadership how they have to prepare by asking the right questions and giving some possible solutions, but by using a case study of a war that happened. Now, earlier you were talking about the stock market and all this, and the future of warfare is interesting because we're seeing it playing out in Ukraine, and in some cases this becomes almost mathematical. For instance, the economy in many cases can be simply said is mathematical. Okay, and it's simply this: economies run on energy. If you decrease the amount of energy an economy has dramatically, it goes into recession. Period.
What an incredible, simple piece of economic wisdom. And
all right, here we go. We're going to be back on the air, and Chuck will take that thought forward. Here we go. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, we are really blessed today to have Colonel John Antal talking to us about his leadership. Go to his website, Leadership Rising. It's showing on Facebook. If you want to know more about that, give me a call. 214-502-4600. And look us up on Facebook, The Veterans Impact Show. Join us, subscribe to our YouTube. Share this message, because what Colonel Antal has done is an incredible book that people need to know, right, Chuck?
Absolutely. And this very much, when you look at the theme of the show, which is Charlie Mike, Continue the Mission, this is very much an example of a man who has continued to lead the nation and offer solutions to the nation, real world solutions, since his days of service. Like he said, he's not getting rich at it, but he's helping to develop the young military leaders, and hopefully some of the young business leaders that are out there.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So I highly recommend his books, the 7 Leadership Lessons of D-Day, the Leadership Lessons of the American Revolution. That was an amazing book.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, and so I can't wait to get this book, 7 Seconds to Die. I think that's tremendous, talking about the way warfare is being done today to be effective. Without a doubt, I bet you are shaking up our military establishment with this book and talking to people, John.
I think that it's having an impact. As I said, I've been able to talk to some very senior leaders, usually much longer than they had time allocated. They would allocate 30 minutes, and we'd talk for an hour and a half, both in the Army and the Marine Corps. Even had a chance to talk to Marines in Japan and some of the Japanese Defense Forces. And the book may be translated into Japanese and Azerbaijani here soon, so we'll see.
One of the things we're faced with, and I got to interrupt you, you are an expert on the Far East. You have very strong connections in Korea. You were in Korea for quite a while. So later on, I would like to ask you to come back and have a discussion about China, what's going on in the South China Seas, because a lot of people don't understand. And when you mentioned something a while ago of energy and fuel, what a lot of people don't know is one of the largest oil fields in the world is in the South China Sea, in the Mekong Delta. And I think that's why the Chinese are going after it, and we've got to be prepared. Having something like this book to read is, without a doubt, very necessary. Colonel Antal, I like to close with a prayer, and so I want to say, before we do that, to say, hey, if you're having a problem and you're a veteran or family member of a veteran, call the Veterans Crisis Line at 800-273-8255. Press 1 if you're a veteran or you're trying to help a veteran. Go to the VA, get help, because a lot of people are struggling, especially after what we saw down in Uvalde. So I want to say a prayer. Dear God, thank you for taking care of our active duty military, keeping them safe. Thank you for men like Colonel John Antal who are teaching us what, wherefore, how we can be protecting ourselves today. Thank you for our veterans that are leading the way in our community. Thank you, most wonderful God, for all you do for us. Thank you, and amen. Chuck?
Yeah, I thought we were done. You normally close with a prayer, and I'm looking at the clock going,
let me add something to the prayer.
Please.
All right, please
Okay.
do.
God bless all friends, confusion to all enemies, especially the Rus.
Love it.
Again,
Absolutely love it.
we want people to go get your book, The 7 Seconds to Die. It's available on Amazon. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's a book people need to read to understand. And I think after what you talked about and what happened in I can't even say it. Azerbaijan, whatever. What we're faced with in Ukraine, what we're faced with in the South China Seas, we better adapt. We better learn from what others have done, or we're going to be in a world of hurt. I also think our leaders need to wake up big time of how dangerous this situation is worldwide. And without a doubt, can we bring about improving the climate, doing these things? Yes, with leadership, but not with firing a cannon. So I want to say thank you, John, for being on board. Thank you, Chuck, for helping us get this started years ago.
Absolutely, and John, I haven't heard or spoken with you in almost 2 years. I am constantly reminded. I take so much away from our conversations. It's outstanding.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Facebook. Thank you,
Well-
Colonel. Have a great day.
All these Army guys have this terrible sneeze or cough.
Somebody's got to take care of them.
Yeah.
God
All
bless.
right. God bless
By
you
the way,
guys.
My brother's a Marine. My father's a Marine, buried at Arlington. Trust me, I know Marines. All right, you guys take care. Good talking with you.
Great talking to you, sir. Have a great
Out
day.
here.
Thank you, Facebook, for being on board with us. Have a great day.